So how's that deficit reduction coming along? Hi, I'm Richard Vague with Tycos. Today we're looking at some of the representations the current administration has made about the U.S. budget. We're not being partisan here. Every administration makes essentially the same claim about reducing the deficit. We just think it's worthwhile to actually check on it occasionally. Not surprisingly, the claims have been bold, as in September of 2024, when candidate Trump claimed that his tariffs will mean that the United States will, quote, have no deficits in a fairly short period of time, end quote. And as President Trump has correctly pointed out, the tariff money is flowing in, end quote. And of course, between DOGE and the big beautiful bill, expenses are aggressively being chopped away. So surely we're seeing big improvements in the deficit. In reality, not so much. As the Associated Press reported on October 23rd of this year, quote, in the midst of a federal government shutdown, the U.S. government's gross national debt surpassed $38 trillion Wednesday, a record number that highlights the accelerating accumulation of debt on America's balance sheet. It's the fastest accumulation of $1 trillion in debt outside of the COVID-19 pandemic, given that the U.S. hit $37 trillion in gross national debt in August this year, end quote. But before we get into the numbers, it's important to note what isn't in them. This data is through September, so it does not yet include any financial impacts from the current or recent government shutdown that began on October 1st. In the past, shutdowns have often cost money, what with the obligation to remit back pay and the need for temporary labor and overtime to dig out of the backlog. The 2018-2019 shutdown cost the economy $11 billion, it's estimated, while a current analysis estimates that an 8-week shutdown would cause up to $14 billion in lost economic output. So it depends on the length of the shutdown. In any event, what the first 9 months of data for this year actually tells us is that almost none of the promised benefit has made a dent in the deficit. Let's start with revenue. It's up, rising from 17.5% of GDP in 2024 to 18.2% in 2025. This increase comes from two places: stronger individual tax income receipts and higher tariff revenue, which combined is up about 1.1 percentage points of GDP. But that should actually bring a note of caution rather than celebration, since most of this is money taken out of the pocketbooks of the household sector, directly through income taxes and indirectly through tariffs, which are paid for at least in part by consumers. And we would note that other types of tax revenue are actually down. On the spending side, things appear to improve. Federal outlays ticked down from 23.6% of GDP in 2024 to 22.9% in 2025. But this 0.7 percentage point drop is more than 100% comprised of an accounting benefit of 1.1 percentage points from the reversal of prior student loan forgiveness, an amount larger than the total drop in spending. It means outside of this one-time adjustment, core government spending actually rose by 0.4 percentage points. So what did all this do to the deficit? It improved from 6.1% of GDP in 2024 to 4.7% in 2025, but that would have been 5.8% without this student loan accounting adjustment. So a very modest reduction achieved through higher tax revenue, largely borne by households. But perhaps that's unfair to the current administration, since President Trump did not take office until late January, and it took some time to initiate his programs. What if we instead just look at the most recent months? Alas, that gives us an even less favorable picture. If we just take the most recent 4 months, well after DOGE and Liberation Day, total revenue to GDP was the same in 2025 as in this same 4 months in 2024, and just a tick above 2023. Expenses to GDP were slightly below 2024, but the same as in 2023. So, essentially no movement. So the deficit for this period, for those four months, was still a nosebleed 4.3% of GDP. Now, for those of you true technicians who are looking at this with us month by month, we actually posted a surplus in September 2025 itself, but a good bit of that was the noted reversal of student loan forgiveness. Further, if you're into it, month-to-month government revenues and expenses are not smooth, but highly lumpy, with months sporadically showing deep deficits or surpluses. This surplus is similar to monthly surpluses posted in April 23, August 23, April 24, September 24, and April of 25. And so it's something that bounces around quite a bit, and the result is not unusual. So a rolling 4-month average is more indicative. I guess we can always be hopeful. And we'll be reporting to you regularly on this going forward, so we'll let you know if real, durable changes show up. Hovering over all of this, the Supreme Court just heard arguments this week challenging the legality of the entire tariff regime, which creates a considerable risk to these results. In fact, in this 4-month period, a reversal of tariffs would have meant revenue would have been only 16% of GDP instead of 17% of GDP. So a big difference and a very different picture of what's going on. Now, if you've been watching us for long, you know that we aren't as concerned about these types of government deficits as others are, since this money, government spending, does not disappear when it gets spent. Instead, it's income to households, and it actually increases household net worth. Further, we would note that while our federal debt is 122% of GDP, Japan's government debt has reached as high as a whopping 247% of GDP, and they have not seen anything of consequence as a result that we would be concerned about, such as a financial crisis, and they've had nothing but low inflation during this debt buildup. In fact, since the pandemic, their government debt has actually been deleveraging all the way down to 214% of GDP. And ironically, just as they've been improving their government debt profile, inflation has actually been trending up, going from 0.5% to a still relatively moderate 3.4% during that period. Financial crises in developed economies don't come from buildups in government debt. We've examined this exhaustively over 6 economies in a 200-year period. Instead, they come from rash, reckless buildups in private sector debt. And inflation comes from radical impacts on supply, as with OPEC's constraints on oil supply in the 1970s, a period in which government debt ratio was actually improving. Instead, our concern about rising government debt is that it forcibly exacerbates inequality. And we'll explore that in a future video. Thanks for watching.